Hi, this is Jen Pearson. Today I am responding to a father who has some concerns about homeschooling. His wife would like to homeschool their child, but he's just not sure that will prepare their child for a job in the future. His first concern was that homeschool teaches kids that they can do whatever they want. And when they enter the real world, they won't be able to sit in a 9 to 5 job because they're used to that lack of structure. First of all, I'd like to say that your homeschool can be whatever you want. You get to base your school on whatever you think is important. So if you really think it's important for your child to be used to structure, to be able to sit for long periods of time and be bored, if you think it's important for them to learn to follow strict rules, then you can put that in place in your homeschool just like they do in school. That is entirely up to you. That's the beauty of homeschool, or one of the many beauties of homeschool, is that you get to decide for yourself. But I'm not so sure that learning to work within the structure of a school setting is really necessary for success in the world after school. So schools impose structure on children. They don't teach children to learn to structure their own activities. They don't teach children that self-discipline that they need to structure their own lives and set goals for themselves and achieve those goals. Yes, some kids get good at doing that in order to get their homework done, but often it's not the schools that are teaching them that. It's either the parents or the child sometimes picks it up on their own. The schools themselves, during the day, it's usually just imposed structure. So it may teach a child to deal with it or to live with it, but it doesn't really teach them how to structure things for themselves and how to set goals and meet goals for themselves. Also, the rules in school are that rhymes. They're much more restrictive than typical rules in a workplace. I really can't imagine anybody choosing to work at a job where they're forced to sit in a desk for pretty much the entire workday, and they're told to be quiet and do their work and not talk to their coworkers. They're not allowed to snack at their desk. They're not allowed to get up and stretch when they need to or walk around the room if they feel like that would help them think. And if they want to go to the bathroom, well, in this workplace, you'd have to raise your hand and ask to go to the bathroom, or you'd have to go when all of your coworkers go to the bathroom at the designated time. I really can't imagine any workplace being like that. And if it were, I don't think most people would want to work there. So the kind of structure that they have in schools is really extreme compared to what we face in the workplace as adults. So I'm not so sure that what they have in school is even in any way preparing kids for that. I know when I taught in college for 6 years before I started homeschooling my children, and I was teaching at Bellarmine University, and it always kind of cracked me up when I had students who would raise their hand and ask to go to the bathroom. And I finally started telling them at the beginning of every semester, I would say, you guys are adults now, and this is college. You don't have to ask to go to the bathroom. If you need to go to the bathroom, just go. And I even would tell them, if you need to get up and like stand in the back of the room and stretch or something, as long as you're not creating a big disturbance, I'm fine with that, because I think people learn better when they have that flexibility to move around a little bit. So typical elementary and middle and high schools aren't like that, but colleges are much more kind of accepting and free with that kind of behavior because they're treating their students like adults. And that's the kind of treatment we expect in the workplace too. So it's not really preparing them for the world of work to do what they are expected to do in school, like in the lower grades and even in high school. The other thing is that schools are based on the premise that most jobs will require workers to be able to follow rules, deal with boredom most of the day, and operate within a structure that's imposed by managers and supervisors. But the problem is most jobs of the future, and especially the good paying jobs of the future, are not going to require those kind of skills. Those kinds of things, those menial, fairly thoughtless kind of jobs are going to be taken over in the future by computers and robots. And the good paying jobs are going to go to people who can think creatively, who can use critical thinking skills and who can do problem solving, the things that computers can't do real well at this point. So I don't think schools necessarily prepare kids well for those kind of jobs. Schools tend to focus still, to a great extent, on finding that one right answer, the convergent thinking instead of divergent thinking. So we're teaching them to find the right answer, and we're teaching them to conform to the group. Because in schools, if you stand out in some way, if you're too much of an individual, then typically the kids kind of bully you and you're sort of forced to be like everyone else. And creative thinking is normally not real encouraged in schools. And certainly questioning the way things are done is not encouraged in a school setting. The school environment also has one other problem. It tends to relegate learning to within the walls of school and within like what is required for the test or the assignment that they have to complete. When I was volunteering at Girl Scout camp a few years ago, I had a girl in one of my groups. I forget, somebody used a word. I don't remember who it was, might've been me, used a word that she didn't understand. And she said, "What does that mean? I've never heard that." So I started giving the definition. And as soon as I defined the word, another girl in my group said, "Oh gosh, this sounds so much like school. This is summer. No learning, no learning. We don't learn in the summer." And I thought, what? You don't learn in the summer? Does that mean you don't learn anymore once you get out of school? Because that's the other skill that will absolutely be required in the future. Lifelong learning, because we don't know what the world's going to look like in 10 or 20 years. So if children aren't taught to constantly be learning and constantly evolving their skills and their knowledge, then they will fall behind when they get out of school and are trying to get a job. They might get a job at first, but if you don't keep up with technology and all the latest things in your field, then you don't stay ahead in your job very long. So it's very important to me as a homeschooler that my children learn that learning is for life. And learning is not something that we do just for school. It's something that we do all the time, forever. I know one of the I can't say it was a deciding factor, but it certainly was something that helped to solidify my idea to homeschool, was when my daughter was in first grade. And she was actually in a Catholic school at that time. And I thought she was getting a pretty good education. And one night, I knew they were working on telling time in school. So one night it was past her bedtime, and I was trying to convince her to go to bed. So I pointed to the clock and I said, "Look at the clock. What time is it? It's after your bedtime." And she looked at the clock and she said, "Mom, I can't read that. We're only learning o'clock and 30, and we're done with time now, so I don't need to know that." And it was like, like a shot to my heart. I was like, "What? You don't need to know that? What do you mean you're done with time?" And I told her, I was like, no, you will need time for the rest of your life. Like, you're going to need to understand time and tell time for life. This is not just something you need to know for school. But so often kids who are in school develop that mindset of, I learn it for the test, I take the test, and then I forget it. I don't need to learn it for anything other than that. And sadly, I think often they don't see the connection between what they're learning in school and the real world. So now as a homeschooler, I make an effort to really point out to my children how things apply in the real world, and how what we're learning, if we do learn in a school setting, which we do some things out of workbooks and kind of sitting in a desk and that kind of thing. So those things I make an effort to really point out, well, these are the ways you might use this in the real world. But then we also do a lot of experiential learning where we do stuff. So we cook and we double recipes, or we have recipes, or we go for a nature walk, or we discuss current events. So very often we have amazing conversations. Sometimes just driving in the car, we have conversations where I tell them about, hey, this is how the government works, and this is a problem that we're having because of that, or this is something that's going on that you might have heard about, and here's the science behind that, or whatever it is. We talk about things that are kind of school subjects, but we do it related to the real world and related to what's going on in the world around them. So they see that this isn't separated from real life. It's something that they need to know for life and to understand the world around them better. So I think it's important that learning be integrated into life and not something that's just relegated to schools and homework. And I think this concern really boils down to this question: what do you think it is important for your child to learn? And if it's important that they learn to follow rules and operate within a structure that's imposed by others, if it's important to you that they adjust to being bored most of the day, then maybe school is a good setting. I don't know. Or maybe you could just put that in place in your homeschool if that's important. But what I think you're really saying is that you want them to be successful in a job someday. And so let's really think about what's going to be necessary in the jobs of the future and the kind of job you hope they'll have. Like, do you hope they'll have a job where they're going to be sitting around bored all day? Probably not. You hope they'll have a job where they're able to enjoy it and be someone who is valued in that job and someone who can do a good job and have a career where they can advance and where they can make a decent living. So I think for that, they're going to need some pretty complex skills in the future. And they're going to need to be able to think in different ways and be creative, and even sometimes to question the way things have always been done. So those are skills you can certainly build into your homeschool.